Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. After fierce backlash, the government is set to revive laws protecting free speech at universities, bringing back the Higher Education Act in a watered-down version. The Act was first brought in under the Conservatives, but Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson paused it last summer with White House sources dubbing it a hate speech charter. Pressure to reinstate the laws came from almost 700 academics, including several Nobel Prize winners, who warned that many university staff had been hounded, censored, silenced, or even sacked for exercising free speech rights. Joining me now to discuss his involvement in reviving the Higher Education Act is the director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Toby, welcome. Lord Young, nearly.
Not yet.
Are you going to be using that? No, you must call me Lord Young.
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so it's big news because it's actually been revived, but you were already taking the government to court, right?
Yes, I mean, I think one of the reasons Bridget Phillipson has decided to commence about 80% of it is because she wanted to avoid the legal challenge, which was due to be heard in the High Court next Thursday.
Yeah.
So our argument was that what she'd done in torpedoing the Freedom of Speech Act was unlawful for two reasons. The first reason was it was passed by both houses of Parliament in 2023. It received support from both parties. It got Royal Assent. And yet she decided she wasn't going to implement it in full. And we think that was an example of a minister of the Crown ignoring the will of Parliament, which is to breach a sacrosanct principle of our Constitution. And secondly, before she made that decision to effectively torpedo it, she didn't do an equality impact assessment, which she's supposed to do. She's supposed to see what effect her decision has on various protected groups. And she didn't do that before making the decision. Anyway, we thought we had a pretty good chance of getting a ruling in the High Court that what she'd done was unlawful, which would have meant either repealing the Act, which would have been perfectly constitutional, but which the Labour government hadn't done, or bringing it in full. So I think partly to avoid being in that situation, she part commenced it last week. And as a result, we've now adjourned our legal challenge until the 1st of July. And the reason we haven't withdrawn it entirely is because we don't want her to think she's got all the time in the world now to bring in the 80% she said she can bring in. Particularly, one of the things the Act does is create a complaint scheme. So the Office for Students, the English Universities regulator, you'll be able to complain to if you're an academic or a visiting speaker, you feel your speech rights have been breached. And if the Director of Free Speech and Academic Freedom at the Office for Students upholds your complaint, he can then fine universities. So that's one way of holding universities' feet to the fire. But she said before she brings in that complaint scheme, she needs to enact primary legislation. She needs to find parliamentary time. And we're worried that that would mean she can effectively wait 2 or 3 years before bringing in that scheme. So we want to hold her feet to the fire by saying if you haven't done this by July 1st, you'll see us in court again.
Because this is very expensive, right, doing this act?
It is expensive, yes.
So, and then, I mean...
I should say, if anyone wants to help the Free Speech Union with its legal fees, which are enormous, we've got a crowdfunder, and you can find that on our website, which is freespeechunion.org.
Cool. Well, I was going to say it, so you saved me the business.
Thank you.
The bother. But why do you think she came in with so determined? It seemed like she was against the bill even before really she took office, or...
Yes,
I mean, that was one of her first actions, right?
Yes. Well, I think a number of theories. When she did it, she said she'd done it because she wanted to end the culture war, which was a peculiar thing to say and quite hard to understand because, you know, a big culture war hot button issue is how to protect free speech in universities. Yeah. And that had been resolved effectively by this piece of legislation. You know, the two sides on that issue, largely divided along party lines, had come together and supported this piece of legislation. The Labour Party supported it. They didn't vote against it. Yeah. So that issue had been resolved, that particular battlefront in the culture war. You know, a truce had been declared. She effectively reopened it by torpedoing the Act, so it hardly ended the culture war. In addition, we think that university vice-chancellors lobbied her to torpedo the legislation because one of its clauses would have required universities to declare overseas funding. And English universities get a lot of funding from China. Universities like UCL in London have something like 14,000 Chinese students on roll. A lot of universities are now financially dependent on effectively being given money by China, and they didn't want to disclose that. They're embarrassed about it, particularly where they've silenced critics of China on campus, or where they allow effectively, proxies for the Chinese secret police to operate on their campuses. And one of the clauses would have effectively forced universities to disclose the extent of their Chinese funding, and they didn't want to do that. And she said that she's going to look again at that clause. That's not one of the clauses she's promised to bring back. So I think that was another reason she was essentially kowtowing to the Chinese lobby within our university sector.
Okay, well, how would you feel if, as you said, it was about 80% of what previously existed, if that was put through, would you be okay? Would it be a compromise that you would be willing to live with?
I can't say I'm happy about it. I would have the bill as it stood, the act rather, was already a compromise.
Yeah.
But it did contain a new tort in English law, whereby if you couldn't get any satisfaction from the Office for Students and you felt that your speech rights really had been breached by a university, you could sue the university in the county court. She's taken away that. That hasn't rendered it completely toothless, but it's taken some of the bite out of it. But I think it's better than where we were when she initially effectively torpedoed the entire thing, and it creates a line in the sand I hope we can't then retreat behind. So if God willing, this government is only a one-term government, then hopefully the next government can do more and bring in the clauses that she hasn't activated.